When Debra Winslow threatens to demolish my son's cherished treehouse, a suburban showdown ignites, pushing me to rally the neighborhood and protect our joy. It was 7 a.m., the sun barely peeking through the dawn haze, when I found an ominous note nailed to the trunk of my son's beloved treehouse. Remove this structure immediately, or face legal action. The threat was scrawled in a furious hand, and I could just picture Debra Winslow, the self-appointed gatekeeper of our neighborhood, monster frown and all, lurking in the shadows. A woman in her 50s, she carried herself like her opinion mattered more than anyone else's, glaring precisely at my property, which she deemed a blight on our estate. My heart sank. How could she question my son's happiness? My trait of nurturing creativity clashed directly with her entitlement. I stumbled back, the cutting chill of her words rendering that early morning air even more frigid. The treehouse was meant to be a sanctuary for Daniel, a space where he could weave improbable tales of knights and dragons from the safety of his rustic bastion. Built with love, sweat, and the obnoxious brightness of bright green paint, a hue I adored, but determined Debra detested, the treehouse stood as a monument to imagination. Now, it was nothing more than a target for her hostility. Moments earlier, I had watched my son's laughter float like gossamer in the morning breeze as he climbed in and out of his adventurous realm. Now, all I could feel was a sense of dread blooming in my chest. Who was she to dictate what we could or couldn't do with our own space? Was it her ambition to manage the minutiae of our lives, to impose her inflexible standards upon the joy of childhood? I clenched my fists, defiance settling like an iron weight deep in my gut. I couldn't let her win. As a single mother, I had always fought tooth and nail for everything Daniel and I had. Each stone in our path had become an opportunity, every objection a chance to build something more resilient. I had fostered creativity in Daniel, nurtured his dreams as if they were fragile flowers in a barren desert, and I would not allow a spiteful woman to uproot them. I turned my back on the threat, the note fluttering menacingly in the wind like a flag over conquered territory. She would not take this from me. The day before the note arrived, I had taken most of a Saturday to give Daniel's treehouse an upgrade. We had painted the shutters bright red, and he had carefully added his favorite action figures to guard the entrance. Now it was a fortress of imagination, not just a simple elevated wooden box. But clearly, Debra saw it as an atrocity, next to her meticulously painted white picket fences and regimented flower beds. I could see the scorn on her face as she strutted past our property, her purse clutched tightly like a weapon, as if the very sight of us could infect her neighborhood's sanctity. With resolve cementing itself in my heart, I knew I needed to rise to this challenge. I would do more than just fight to keep Daniel's sanctuary. I would expand it, fortifying our position against her harsh judgment. Inspiration surged through me, bringing flashbacks of the fairy tales I read as a child when an underdog triumphed against insurmountable odds. I envisioned a whole fort, a spectacle that neither Debra nor anyone else would dare threaten. The idea took root, blossoming into something extraordinary. By noon that day, I was ready. I planned to call in friends and neighbors who understood that creativity didn't harm property values or dilute community standards. If Debra wanted a war over this treehouse, then I would give her a fortification worth fuming about. I set about gathering lumber, paint, carpets, anything that could transform the existing treehouse into a grand fort fit for an entire battalion of imaginary knights. I could already feel the thrill of ambition coursing through me as I envisioned swathes of multicolored pennants flapping in the breeze. My friends rallied behind me, their camaraderie kindling a warmth that rushed through me like an electric current. We raised walls, built battlements, and repurposed old furniture into makeshift towers. I invited Daniel to participate, to help decorate and plan, and watched as his eyes lit up like fireworks. This was no longer just a refuting act against Debra. It turned into a tapestry interwoven with laughter, creativity, and days of shared joyful efforts. As I stepped back to admire our work at dusk, the colorful fort glowed against the waning sun, shimmering in the dying light like a jewel among the ordinary houses of our neighborhood. It was more than a response. It was an assertion of our right to joy, an unyielding refusal to let the overbearing presence of someone who didn't understand stifle our creativity. My heart swelled with pride, an assertion echoing in the twilight air. This was our home, and no gatekeeper could take that away. It was a bright Saturday morning, the sun hanging low in the sky, its golden rays spilling over the edges of clouds like the warm embrace of a friend. The flush of inspiration surged through me, obliterating the dread from the threatening note that Debra Winslow had nailed to the treehouse just days prior. My mind buzzed with images of what our space could become, a sanctuary for my son Sam, where imagination could soar without confinement, a haven emboldened against the unreasonable demands of a woman who saw the world as a uniform tapestry that left no room for joy. If she thought her threats could intimidate my resolve, then she had gravely underestimated me. As I mulled over it, my heart raced with excitement. I felt a tide of determination roll through me, kindling a fire I hadn't realized was flickering timidly deep within. No longer would I stand idly by while someone like Debra trampled on our little piece of happiness. Drawing from the well of courage I had fostered through years of single motherhood, I got serious about creating not just a treehouse but an entire fort. It would become a monument to childhood wonderment and creativity, rebelling against the waves of suppression I felt rising up around us. I envisioned it as a place where courage would reign supreme, a place where dreams could be transformed into reality. With a giddy sense of purpose, I began to gather supplies. I enlisted the help of neighbors who understood what it meant to have a dream, those who could see beyond the rigid conformity Debra seemed to wield like a scepter. We organized a workday, promising laughter and camaraderie, as well as a chance to brighten the drab landscape of our neighborhood with colors and creativity. Hands raised in solidarity, our collective spirit flourished like newly blossomed flowers, eager for sunlight. I glimpsed the potential for unity among neighbors who were willing to stand up for the joy of childhood creativity. Our project took on a life of its own as we transformed the treehouse into a massive fort bursting with personality. Everywhere you looked, we infused new elements that showcased our vision. A pirate flag danced in the soft breeze from the rooftop, splashes of primary colors adorned each wall, and makeshift battlements crafted from reclaimed wood added a touch of enchanting whimsy. I watched in awe as my friends hacked, hammered, and painted, turning what was once a simple treehouse into an impressive structure alive with possibility. The sight of Sam beaming with pride as the project unfolded before him filled me with joy, and I knew we were creating something special together. Each day brought new inspiration, where laughter echoed like music through the branches as my friends and I worked side by side. One afternoon, I even invited Sam to express his creativity on the walls of our burgeoning fort, letting him splatter vibrant graffiti styling of dragons and treasure maps, capturing the essence of adventurous play. The fort quickly became a magical kingdom filled with stories that he could tell for years to come, where he would host epic battles and face dragons, all while cloaked in the freedom of imagination. With every brushstroke, I could feel oppression's grip loosening its hold, giving way to an exhilarating feeling of empowerment and defiance. However, just as we were gaining momentum, that unmistakable blue sedan rolled into our view, creeping around the cul-de-sac like a dark cloud with menacing intention. Debra's presence loomed large as she pulled up across the street. I recognized her car from a mile away, the way it parked sharply, like she intended to stake a claim over our newfound joy. Instinctively, my heart began to race, panic surging through me like ice water. The way she glared out the window, her stern visage etched with a deepening scowl, told me everything I needed to know. This would be her declaration of war. She stepped out of the car, her rigid posture revealing a queen of conformity, face twisted in disbelief as she took in the sight of our vibrant fort. It was as though I could feel the heat radiating from her, even at such a distance. I knew she would soon march over, prepared to verbally eviscerate our work, her disdain fully manifested in every step she took toward our creation. But instead of allowing her frown to dim the vibrancy we had built, I felt my resolve only solidifying. How dare she believe she could extinguish our joy? Fueled by purpose, I held my ground, taking a deep breath as I prepared to face her onslaught. This is our creation, I thought assertively, the words echoing in my mind, bolstering my courage. We are building something much larger than this. Fort, we are nurturing a sense of belonging and creativity against the stifling nature of control. You can't take that from us, Debra. In the depths of my heart, I understood that our fort wasn't just about reclaiming a playful atmosphere. It symbolized support, a unifying force against oppression, and I was ready to defend it with everything I had. The battle was just beginning, but I felt invincible amidst the gathering storm. Each brushstroke and each new decoration had been a testament to not only our artistic spirit, but also our undeterred belief in the essence of childhood. With my neighbors at my side, we prepared to transform this conflict into a homegrown revolution, a spirited reminder that imagination can never truly be contained. The evening air was thick with anticipation, a velvety blanket of uncertainty draping over my home as I prepared for the Homeowners Association meeting. The sun had dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in swirls of orange and purple, but my heart felt heavy with the darkness looming ahead. The relentless storm clouds crafted by Debra Winslow and her band of so-called concerned residents hung over me like a sword poised to strike. Last week had morphed into a continuous cycle of mounting tension as her grating voice insisted I dismantle our fort, labeling it not only a distraction, but a blatant offense against our community values. In her mind, the fort was an eyesore. In mine, it was a vibrant celebration of everything childhood should represent. As that fateful night unfurled, I found myself at the kitchen table, papers strewn before me, a battlefield where eloquence needed to clash against bitterness. I allowed my fingers to trace the edges of each note, feeling their weight like heavy stones. I had transformed my thoughts into an argumenta collection of ideas that showcased our fort not just as a plaything, but as a vivid imprint of love, imagination, and community. This is about more than just property lines. I practiced aloud, the echo of my voice reaffirming my resolve. I imagined how I would speak of gathering friends, forging connections, and creating a safe haven. It needed to evoke not only a sense of belonging, but courage against the ruling hand of oppression. The clock ticked ominously as I recited my reframed narrative, each word flowing with passion, and with every chorus, I felt the power of defiance coursing through me. The air felt electrified, pregnant with rebellion as I visualized Debra's condescending stare, scrutinizing my every gesture as if she expected me to tremble at her threats. But within me grew an indomitable spirit, I wouldn't let her dictate the narrative of my family's happiness. No longer would I watch as she painted us with a brush of irresponsibility. This was our family legacy, and anger swelled in my chest like a dragon ready to take flight. When I arrived at the community center, the atmosphere was charged, filled with a chatter reminiscent of bees buzzing wildly around a swarm. Residents sat on folding chairs, a sea of faces divided between curiosity and judgment. As I approached, I could see Debra poised at the front of the room like a well-armed general expertly conducting a war council, her bitter features outlined starkly against the dim lighting. She projected authority. Her presence overshadowed many of the quieter voices, manipulating the room's energy sinfully. And just as I feared, she began to eat away at our fort's integrity, articulating her demand for its immediate removal while painting us as a disruptive influence. But her commotion only summoned a more potent force within me. I straightened my spine, feeling that primal urge to protect what we had created. As I stepped up to counter her argument, adrenaline surged through me, and I locked eyes with Debra. Her steely gaze scrutinized me, searching for the chink in my armor, but as I began to speak, I noticed several supportive nods and murmurs from around the room. "This fort represents childhood joy," I declared, my voice unwavering, every word an extension of my heart. "It is a place where sons and daughters discover courage and adventure, where friends are forged. We must celebrate such things, not condemn them." My heart raced, but my conviction rallied those around me. Despite the flickering hope around the room, Debra persisted. Her words twisted into venomous threats, as she prophesied doom a neighborhood petition to oust us for the sake of uniformity, as if our laughter and creativity could somehow harm their precious landscape. The promise hung in the air, a suffocating weight that made the collective breath of the crowd hitch. "For the good of the community," she insisted, her glacial tone chilling every atom in my body. I could see the calculations in her piercing eyes, preparing to bask in their fearful obedience, but I stood adamant. Yet, in that whirlwind of chaos, I perceived a ripple of defiance in the crowd. Whispers formed, glances bounced between concerned neighbors bearing the marks of solidarity. For a moment, I dared to envision a scenario where the community rallied around us, not against us. The feathers of doubt fell off my heart, reassured by glimmers of warmth stirring in the otherwise cold assembly. They were not all blinded by Debra's iron grip. She was losing her hold. The meeting crescendoed into a fever pitch. I could feel the tide turning, the swell that threatened to crush Debra's dominion. But even as she stormed out of the room, there was no victor to claim that night. The threat still loomed, an unsettling undercurrent that would follow me home, a knowing chill wrapping around me like an unwanted embrace. I sensed her resolve was far from dispelled, and a battle persisted within me, a growing determination that morphed into an ironclad resolve. I would not let this end without a fight. Through it all, the love behind our fort kept pushing forward. After all, this wasn't merely about retaining a structure. It was a stand for joy, for creativity, and for every family daring to chase their dreams against the odds. The next day dawned gray and rainy. Clouds mirrored the turmoil swirling in my gut. Tendrils of anxiety coiled around my heart, squeezing it as Debra Winslow, that fiery catalyst of discontent, had managed to rally many neighbors to her cause overnight. Our fort wasn't merely a project anymore, it had become a flashpoint for her relentless desire for control, and its impending demolition loomed over me like an ominous storm cloud, threatening to unleash its fury any moment. To make matters worse, my son Sam bounded through the house, an innocent smile plastered across his face, blissfully unaware of the storm closing in. "Mom! Mom! I was thinking we could have my birthday party in the fort this weekend," he squealed, his bright eyes sparkling with excitement. My heart twisted at the thought of having to tell him that this magical bastion of adventure might be torn down before his party. The weight of responsibility bore down on me. I couldn't allow my sweet boy to suffer because of Debra's demand for uniformity. I had created this fort for him, and it had become a haven where his laughter echoed sweetly against the backdrop of verdant leaves. Each memory carved within its walls was woven with joy, something so profound that I refused to let it dissolve into nothingness under Debra's oppressive wrath. As I watched Sam bounce around the living room, entirely enthralled by his daydreams of sword fights and dragon slaying in our magical fort, an idea danced into the forefront of my mind. What if I could turn this around? What if I could use this moment to rally not just my son but the neighborhood, to drum up support through joy instead of fear? If we had to fight, we would do so with love. My nails dug into the palm of my hands as inspiration sparked within me like fireworks. The fort wasn't just lumber and nails. It was a symbol, a call to arms for every child's right to play, to create, and to dream. I began plotting my defense strategy while Sam continued to hum melodies of adventuring and heroism. I would throw the most dazzling fort celebration imaginable, an event that would entice even the most reluctant neighbors to our side. I envisioned bright banners hung from the tree, games strewn across the yard, laughter threaded through the air like colorful ribbons weaving behind love and connection. We would invite the entire block. I would gesture to them not only to partake in the fun, but to rally around us in solidarity. This fort was built for every child in the neighborhood. Their imaginations deserved a sacred space to flourish, and who of all people could deny a gathering of joy? As I flipped through pastel invitations, hand-drawing the edges to make them inviting, I heard a muffled knock at the door, followed by my neighbor Lisa. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, concern washing over her features as she stepped inside, glancing around at my chaotic workspace. "I overheard some of the others talking. They're really worried about the fort. Can you even fight this?" I could feel every fiber inside me wanted to shriek with frustration. But with calm determination, I explained my plan, how joy and community could drown out their collective fear. By the end of my pitch, I could see the flicker of hope ignite in her eyes, and she nodded along enthusiastically. I think we might need to do this together. I can help," she offered, her smile infectious. Excitement built within me as we pored over the logistics, each giggle brightening my sorrow-laden soul. But amidst this new energy, the darkness of the reality loomed, a nagging reminder that Debra would likely not stand idly by. I couldn't shake the thought. Would this backfire? Would throwing the party serve as kindling for her rage, an opportunity for her to rally the naysayers tighter? I shook off the doubt, whispering that love could bind us all together. Over the next few days, I organized the party, crafting colorful invites, planning scavenger hunts, and even setting up a cotton candy machine that would elevate the grandeur of the gathering. I would ensure it embodied everything Debra fought against: laughter, creativity, and community spirit. The moment Sam learned that we were inviting the whole block, he dove headfirst into the preparations, scribbling elaborate maps of imaginary kingdoms around his fort for the treasure hunt. But in quiet moments, when I prepared to sleep, I found the weight of apprehension surfacing at the edges of my dreams, chewed with remnants of Debra's vitriol, a reminder of the battles that may yet arise. Yet as dawn kissed the earth, coaxing color into the world, I took heart from the resolve that blossomed within me. This fort celebration would be our stand against fear, a surge of love, against the cold threats that sought to tear us asunder. If love was the weapon we wielded, then it would be enough. The day of the fort party arrived, the sun shining brightly, filling the air with joy and laughter that seemed to wrap around the neighborhood, escaping the gloomy shadows that had loomed over us for so long. As I stood on our front lawn, watching the last inflatables inflate and the cotton candy machine whirl, it felt surreal. Families began to arrive, a joyful procession of curious neighbors eager to see what the buzz was about. Small children dashed towards the fort, their squeals echoing through the soft afternoon air like a symphony of freedom. Just moments ago, I'd been petrified by the looming threat of Debra's wrath. Now, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride watching our little community embrace something so whimsical. Sam, dressed in a Captain America t-shirt, raced through the throngs of kids, his laughter infectious as he scrambled up the steps of our newly transformed fort. With vibrant pennants trailing in the breeze and a banner proclaiming, "The greatest adventure exists here," flapping proudly overhead, everyone seemed enchanted. Their joy coursed through me like electricity, lighting up every doubt I had harbored about this gathering being a misstep. It was wild. It was chaotic. It was precisely the kind of magical disorder I hoped for. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were witnessing something momentous, a shift against a force that sought to quash such innocence and creativity. And then, amid the swirling colors of laughter and cotton candy, I saw her Debra Winslow, arms crossed and her face a mask of bitterness, lurking at the edge of the crowd like a storm cloud refusing to disperse. I felt my heart race at the sight, the sharp contrast between her stoic demeanor and Sam's eruptive delight so jarring that it drew me in like a moth to a flame. There she stood, biting her tongue, clearly trying to suppress the discontent swirling in her imposing figure, while every child around her erupted into giggles and games, oblivious to the negativity lurking nearby. The audacity of that moment was palpable. It was as if we were living in two different worlds, and how I wished she could step into mine. As the afternoon progressed, the other neighbors seemed to rally around us without hesitation. Laughter erupted from the fort, echoing like tiny fireworks as kids played hide-and-seek among the battlements and climbed the tree limbs like they were the highest mountains. Families began to share funny stories about the fort's conception, marveling at its transformation and daring to stand next to its creator. I watched as the walls of resistance around me dissolved under the weight of camaraderie and joy. Each laugh, every shout of excitement served as testimony to what this space represented: a community's defiance against the suffocating grip of disapproval imposed by one domineering figure. Eventually, my newfound allies began engaging Debra, pointing out the palpable joy radiating from the fort and the families around it. "Don't you want your kids to have a place like this?" one neighbor asked, her voice laced with confusion and concern, the way one might address a stubborn child. "You can't possibly want to take this away from them." Debra's eyes flashed, temporarily betraying the icy exterior she so rigidly maintained. She huffed beneath her breath, her face a storm unyielding to the sunshine breaking through. The confrontation, brewing for weeks, had finally hit its boiling point, unfolding in a crescendo of community spirit and defiance against her attempts to impose isolation. As they rallied together, the tension between her and the neighbors rippled through the atmosphere like a charged current. I could feel her pressing glare on me, and my heart raced with nervous excitement. Humor danced out of her in swirling eddies that could bring chaos, yet our own expressions were solid and steadfast against her militant stance. "This place looks like disaster waiting to happen," She spat, a low growl barely contained within her bravado, yet I smiled at the thought of how many wonderful smiles and memories this supposed disaster would create. My heart surged as the party peaked, blissful shouts mixing with the sweet aromas of popcorn and fresh fruit pouring from trays. Each display of belief in our fort transformed it into a monument of our aspirations against her dissatisfaction. I saw the moment Debra's stoic facade began to crack a slight twitch in her rigid posture, shoulders sagging ever so slightly. As I watched her slip further away into the melancholic shadows she seemed to thrive in, a loud cheer erupted from the fort as Sam led the children in a victory chant, voices crescendoing against her discontent. Ultimately, Debra turned away, her arms uncrossing to hang listlessly at her sides, defeated. It was a good day for our neighborhood, a vivid reminder of love's power against tyranny. The warmth of my son's embrace wrapped around me like a warm blanket as he beamed up at me with those cerulean eyes filled with joy and pride. In that fiercely glorious moment, I knew we had triumphed not just for us, but for every family daring to chase joy against the odds, to bless their children with imaginative spaces that protected creativity and love. This battle had shifted something within me. We had forged not only a fort, but a community that would stand by each other, filled with the hope that joy could triumph over fear.